She had never felt so alone in a crowded room. Alara sat at the small table, the crimson of her dress a stark contrast to the muted blues and grays of the Mockingbird Cantina. 20 minutes had bled into 45, each tick of the clock a small tap against her composure. The dress, chosen with such care and hope, now felt like flimsy armor against the inevitable. Outside, a classic Austin thunderstorm raged, rain lashing against the windows. But the tempest couldn't muffle the sound of her own heart breaking when the man seated across from her finally spoke the words that would splinter her evening. "I had no idea you were actually handicapped." In that singular, crushing moment, as a tidal wave of unshed tears burned behind her eyes, she could never have predicted that a stranger's hands, moving in the silent, graceful language of her heart, would soon offer the very words she desperately needed to hear: "You deserve better." The question hung in the air between them, sharp and cruel as a shard of glass. "Wait, are you Death?" Kyle's expression twisted from mild irritation at his own tardiness into something far uglier. It was a raw, unfiltered disgust that made Alara's stomach clench. Her fingers tightened around the sweating glass of water, her knuckles turning white as she fought to keep her hands from trembling. She had rehearsed this. She had planned for the conversation, the gentle explanation, but she hadn't planned for this revulsion. 45 minutes she had waited, a slow, agonizing simmer of hope turning to the bitter broth of humiliation, while other patrons offered looks that toggled between pity and curiosity. And now, this. "I have moderate to severe sensory neural hearing loss," she replied, her voice a carefully constructed wall of calm against the tremor that threatened to betray her. "I wear hearing aids. I noted it in my profile." "You said you had hearing difficulties," Kyle scoffed, his fingers sketching dismissive quotation marks in the air. "I figured that meant, sometimes you mishear a song lyric or need the TV turned up. I didn't realize you were actually—" He trailed off, his gaze sweeping over her face, snagging on the subtle, flesh-toned devices nestled behind her ears, glinting in the cantina. "Some people don't understand things, sweet girl. Some people are just—" He searched for a word that could explain such casual cruelty to a child. "Unkind." But Kyle was far from finished. He had already pulled out his phone, his thumb swiping through a feed as if Alara had ceased to exist, her pain as insignificant as the soft indie rock filtering through the speakers. "Look, this just isn't what I signed up for," he announced, his voice loud enough to make heads turn at several adjacent tables. The heat of their stares felt like a physical weight on Alara's skin. "I can't deal with all this. Do you have any idea how exhausting that would be? Having to repeat myself all the time, worrying about whether you can hear in a loud place? My buddies would have a field day. Dating a woman who can't even hear right?" A flicker of defiance ignited within her. Alara's spine straightened, and for a fleeting moment Jamal witnessed something truly magnificent in her posture. It was a profound dignity, radiating from her despite the tears that now shimmered, threatening to spill over. "I am a pediatric nurse," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I graduated from the University of Texas with honors. I speak 3 languages, one of which is silent. My hearing loss is part of me, but it does not define my worth." Kyle stood abruptly, the legs of his chair screeching a protest against the polished concrete floor. "No offense, but I have standards. This is exactly why people need to be honest on their profiles. I wasted my entire Friday night because you couldn't just be upfront about being disabled." The word disabled settled over the table like a toxic fog. Jamal felt his body move before his mind fully processed the decision. He rose from his seat, a fluid motion born of quiet strength that made Maya let out a small, surprised gasp. But he didn't walk toward Kyle. That would have been too predictable, too easy. Instead, he positioned himself directly in front of Alara's table, his back a solid wall to the cruel man who was already making his way toward the exit. Then, Jamal's hands began to move. The gestures were deliberate, imbued with a grace that seemed to calm the very air around them. Each sign flowed into the next, a silent poem he'd performed 1,000 times for his daughter, a mask of confusion and mounting irritation as he watched the exchange. You know that sign language crap? Figures. Birds of a feather, huh? You two probably deserve each other. The door swung shut behind him, leaving only the lingering echo of his ignorance and the gentle rhythm of the rain against the glass. Jamal turned back to Alara, and for a long, suspended moment they simply looked at each other. In his dark, steady eyes she saw a profound kindness, something genuine and unguarded. And in hers, despite the fresh wound Kyle had inflicted, he saw a resilient strength that took his breath away. "May I?" Jamal asked, gesturing with his chin toward the empty chair across from her. Alara could only nod, her voice still lost somewhere between shock and gratitude. As Jamal slid into the seat, a small figure appeared at his side. It was Maya, clutching her coloring book to her chest, her own hearing aids catching the warm light of the cantina. "I'm so sorry you had to witness that," Jamal said aloud, his hands mirroring the words in smooth, practiced signs. "Some people show you their true character right away. In a way, he did you a favor by leaving so quickly." Elara's gaze shifted to Maya, and she watched the little girl's eyes track their hands with the focused intensity of a native speaker. "Is she?" Alara began, her voice soft with a dawning sense of wonder. "This is my daughter Maya," Jamal signed and spoke in unison. "She's had progressive hearing loss since she was 3. We're learning to navigate this journey together." Both there was something in the way he framed it. Journey, not a struggle, not a burden, but a journey that caused a tectonic shift deep in Elara's chest. Here was a father, a handsome black man with kind eyes and hands that spoke of both hard work and tenderness, who saw his daughter's condition not as a deficit, but simply as a part of her narrative. "Hi," Maya signed shyly, inching closer to Alara. "You're pretty. That man was mean. Daddy says mean people are just afraid of things they don't understand." A laugh bubbled up from Elara's throat, so unexpected and genuine it felt like a release. The sound transformed her face, chasing away the shadows Kyle had tried to cast there. She signed back, her movement blurred by the unexpected beauty of the moment. It had been 2 years since a reckless driver had stolen her from them on her morning jog, leaving Jamal to navigate the treacherous waters of single fatherhood and Maya's diagnosis all alone. He had thrown himself into learning sign language, first out of sheer necessity, staying up late with online tutorials, his hands feeling clumsy and foreign as he practiced in the bathroom mirror. But what had begun as a practical tool had blossomed into something sacred, a private language between him and his daughter, a way to say "I love you" that was uniquely theirs. "You sign beautifully," Alara said to Jamal, her words pulling him from his reverie. "How long have you been learning?" "About 3 years now since we got Maya's diagnosis. It was overwhelming at first," he admitted. "I remember sitting in that audiologist's office on Red River Street, listening to them talk about decibels and progressive loss and feeling like my whole world was tilting off its axis." He glanced at his daughter, who was now earnestly showing Alara the half-colored page in her book. "But then I realized it wasn't an ending. It was just a different kind of beginning." Alara's eyes glistened. "Most people don't see it that way. My ex-fiancé certainly didn't. He said my hearing loss made our lives too complicated." She said the word with a distaste that was palpable. That was his favorite word. As if any meaningful relationship isn't supposed to require a little effort. "Can I tell you a secret?" Maya signed suddenly, looking at Alara with the grave solemnity that only a 7-year-old can truly master. Alara nodded, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Sometimes," Maya signed, her eyes wide, "when it's really loud and I turn my hearing aids off, it's like having a superpower. I can make all the noisy things go quiet. And then Daddy and I can talk with our hands, and it's our own magic language that nobody else knows." Jamal felt a lump form in his throat. Leave it to his daughter to find the magic where others saw only limitation. I know exactly what you mean, Ilara signed back, a genuine smile lighting her features. When I was in nursing school after I lost a significant stilling for a moment as she looked down at the table. This was my first attempt at dating in over 2 years. I spent hours getting ready, practicing what I would say, trying to convince myself that maybe this time it would be different. When he was late, I told myself it was just Austin traffic. When he wouldn't look up from his phone, I thought maybe he was just nervous. I've become an expert at making excuses for people who don't deserve them. Jamal reached across the table, not to touch her, but to simply place his hand, palm up, on the worn wooden surface. It was an offering, not a demand. We all do that sometimes, he said softly, signing as he spoke. We accept less than we deserve because we convince ourselves it's better than being alone. But being alone isn't the worst thing in the world. Being with someone who makes you feel alone, that's infinitely worse. Ilara looked at his open hand for a long moment, at the strong, capable fingers that had spoken to her when she felt most invisible. Then, she placed her own hand on top of his. Her skin was warm, her touch steady, a quiet testament to the strength he had seen in her from across the room. Daddy, Maya signed with her free hand, a mischievous glint in her eye. Are you making a new friend? I certainly hope so, Jamal signed back, his gaze locked with Ilara's. Just then, the restaurant manager, an older woman with kind eyes and a cascade of silver hair, approached their table. Excuse me, she said, making a point to face Ilara directly so she could read her lips. I saw what happened earlier with that gentleman. His behavior was completely unacceptable. She looked from Jamal to Ilara and then to Maya. Your meals tonight, for all 3 of you, are on the house. It's the very least we can do. Jamal started to protest, but the manager raised a hand to stop him. Please, that young woman deserves to have her evening salvaged from such ignorance. And you, sir, she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. What you did, standing up for a stranger like that? We need... Jamal's smile softened, but didn't vanish. Simone passed away 2 years ago, a drunk driver, during her early morning run along Ladybird Lake. She never came home. He paused, his hand still for a moment under hers. She would have loved you. She was actually studying to become a sign language interpreter when Maya was diagnosed. She said she wanted our daughter to grow up knowing she was perfect, exactly as she was. She sounds wonderful, Ilara signed, her eyes soft with an empathy that felt like a warm embrace. She was, he confirmed, and she would have absolutely decimated that guy with a few well-chosen words for what he said to you. Simone had a gift for what she called educational decimation, the art of tearing down someone's ignorance with surgical precision. Daddy tells the best stories about Mommy, Maya interjected, having followed their signed conversation intently. She's an angel now. That's why her name was Simone, because it sounds like Simongels. She watches us from heaven and sends us rainbows. That's right, sweet girl, Jamal murmured. Their food arrived shortly after, Jamal and Maya's usual orders, and the manager had taken the liberty of bringing Ilara the cantina's famous smoked brisket enchiladas. As they ate, the conversation flowed with a surprising, welcome ease. Ilara taught Maya new signs for animals and colors. Jamal shared stories about Maya's elementary school, how she was the only deaf student but her classmates had all started learning basic signs from a chart her teacher posted. Last week, Jamal said, a proud grin spreading across his face. Her entire first-grade class signed happy birthday to her during the school assembly. 22 6-year-olds, all signing in unison. Her teacher had been secretly teaching them for weeks. I'm not ashamed to admit I cried my eyes out. Daddy cried so much, Maya added with the brutal honesty of a child. The principal thought he had allergies. Ilara shared her own stories. The little boy with new cochlear implants who was terrified of his first MRI until she showed him her own hearing aids and taught him the sign for brave. The teenage girl who had fallen into a coloring book and explaining the elaborate backstory for each drawing. Ilara listened with rapt attention, asking questions and making suggestions, her focus absolute. She doesn't usually warm up to people this fast. Jamal signed to Ilara over Maya's head while she was engrossed in choosing the perfect shade of green for a turtle. She's been much more reserved since we lost her mom. But with you, it's like she recognizes something familiar, a kindred spirit. Ilara signed back, her eyes twinkling. We're part of the same tribe, she and I. The beautiful Silence tribe. Jamal had never heard it described that way, but watching his daughter and this remarkable woman communicate with such effortless joy, he understood completely. They shared something far deeper than hearing loss. They shared the profound knowledge that being different didn't mean being less than. It's getting late, Jamal finally said, noticing that it was well past Maya's bedtime. The little girl was beginning to yawn, her signs becoming slower and less precise. Of course, Ilara said, starting to gather her purse. Thank you for everything. For showing me that not everyone is like Kyle. Wait, Jamal said, pulling out his phone. Maya and I have a standing breakfast date every Saturday morning. 9 o'clock, Kirby Lane Cafe on South Lamar. They have the best gingerbread pancakes in the whole city, and it's usually quiet enough for easy conversation. Would you like to join us tomorrow? Ilara hesitated for just a fraction of a second, and in that beat of silence, Jamal felt his heart stutter. Had he moved too fast? Had he misread the entire evening? Please come, Maya signed sleepily from her seat. I want to show you my book about monarch butterflies. And Daddy makes the worst jokes, but I bet you'll laugh at them anyway. Hey, Jamal protested, though he was smiling. Ilara looked from the father, who had defended her dignity without a moment's hesitation, to the daughter, who saw her hearing aids not as a flaw to be stared at, but as a point of connection. She felt something inside her chest unlock, a door that had been bolted shut since her last relationship ended, since she had started to book him. It was a simple, beautiful dance of parental care. Thank you, Ilara said as they stood by the door, the cool night air a welcome balm, for reminding me that I deserve better. Jamal met her gaze, his expression serious. You don't need reminding. You just needed someone else to finally see what was true all along. They parted ways in the parking lot, the earlier downpour having softened to a gentle mist. Jamal buckled Maya into her car seat, and she immediately began signing a mile a minute, her hands a blur of motion as she recounted how nice Ilara was, how pretty, how she knew all the butterfly signs. Could she please come to breakfast tomorrow? She already said yes, sweet girl, Jamal reminded her, his heart feeling impossibly full. But what if she forgets? What if she decides we're not cool enough? Jamal met his daughter's worried eyes in the rearview mirror. Then we'll eat a big stack of pancakes by ourselves and be grateful we got to meet her tonight. But I have a feeling she won't forget. In her own car, Ilara sat for a long moment before turning the key in the ignition. She touched the simple silver locket at her throat, a gift from her grandmother, who had also been deaf. Never let anyone make you feel like you are less than whole, her grandmother had signed to her years ago, her hands weathered but steady. You are complete exactly as you are. The right person won't see your deafness as something to be overcome. they'll see it as a verse in the poem of who you are. For years, she had thought those were just comforting words, the kind of thing a loving grandmother says. But tonight, watching Jamal's hands shape words of kindness in the air, watching him teach his daughter that her hearing loss was a journey, not a tragedy, she finally truly understood what her grandmother had meant. Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly, but inside Kirby Lane Cafe, it was warm, bright, and filled with the comforting smell of coffee and syrup. Jamal and Maya had arrived 15 minutes early, Maya insisting they claim their usual booth by the window. She had brought her butterfly book and had been practicing the signs for each species in the car. They're pretty even with the sound off. Worst cooking disasters. Jamal had once managed to set a pot of chili on fire, a feat Elara insisted was scientifically impossible, leading to a hilarious, detailed explanation that had them all in stitches. Childhood pets. Elara had grown up with a fluffy white cat named Beethoven, because he too was deaf. Can I tell you something? Maya signed to Elara while Jamal was at the counter paying the check, insisting on treating despite Elara's protests. Elara nodded, leaning in close. Daddy hasn't smiled this much since Mommy went to heaven. I think you make him happy. Elara felt a familiar prickle of tears behind her eyes, but this time they were tears of pure joy. He makes me happy too, she signed back. Good, Maya signed with decisive finality. Then you should keep having breakfast with us. One breakfast became 2, then 3, then a standing Saturday tradition. Within a month, Elara was a regular at their Wednesday night pizza and a movie dinners. Within 2 months, she was sitting in a school auditorium, tears streaming down her face as she watched Maya perform a poem in both spoken word and sign language, her heart swelling with pride as the entire audience erupted in both thunderous applause and the silent, beautiful applause of hands waving in the air. Elara taught Maya the basics of medical science, turning anatomy lessons into fun games. Jamal, a contractor, taught her construction science, which inevitably led to the three of them building increasingly elaborate blanket forts that took over his entire living room. They began creating their own signs, a private lexicon that belonged only to them, a sign for Pancake Saturday, another for Butterfly Friend, which was Maya's name for Elara, and one that meant our person, a sign Jamal used for both Elara and Maya, his hands shaping a gesture that encompassed his whole world. 3 months after that first rainy night, Jamal was driving Elara home from dinner when she suddenly said, "Pull over." Instantly concerned, he swerved into the nearest empty parking lot. "Are you okay? Did I?" She silenced him by leaning across the center console and kissing him, a kiss that was both, "You see the world the same way we do. Because you've shown us that our little family of 2 wasn't broken. It was just waiting for the right person to make it whole." 6 months later, on a sun-drenched September afternoon that was the complete opposite of the rainy night they met, Jamal proposed. He did it back at the Mockingbird Cantina in the very same booth. But this time he had coordinated with the staff, and the restaurant was filled with their closest friends and family. When he got down on one knee, he signed his proposal, his hands steady despite the frantic beating of his heart. "You taught me that love doesn't need a single word to be heard. Will you marry me?" Maya stood beside him, holding a brightly colored sign that read, "Say yes, I already picked out my flower girl dress." Through a blur of happy tears, Elara signed back, her hands trembling with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Their wedding the following spring, held under the sprawling oak trees of Zilker Park, was unlike any the guests had ever attended. Every word of the ceremony was both spoken and signed. Maya, as the flower girl, signed a poem about family that she had written herself. Jamal's vows made everyone weep. "Elara, you walked into our lives on a night when we thought we were complete, and showed us just how much more room we had in our hearts. You didn't fill a void. You expanded our capacity for joy. You've taught Maya that her differences are her superpowers. You've taught me that the most important conversations often happen in silence. You've shown us both that family isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing each other every single day, exactly as we are. Ilara's vows were just as moving. Jamal, Maya, you rescued me on a night when I felt like I wasn't enough. You showed me that the right people don't see my deafness as an obstacle to be managed, but as a part of the story to be embraced. You have given me a family that speaks my language, not just ASL, but the language of unconditional love and acceptance. I promise to love you both with my hands, my heart, and every part of who I am. During the reception, Jamal's best man revealed something that sent a fresh wave of emotion through the crowd. After that first night at the camp, specifically for young patients adapting to hearing loss, she would sit with them for hours, show them her state-of-the-art hearing aids, teach them funny signs, and tell them her story. The story of a night when a cruel man tried to make her feel worthless, and how that very night led her to a family who knew her true worth without a single doubt. Different doesn't mean broken, she would tell them, signing as she spoke. It just means you get to experience the world in your own unique, beautiful way. One afternoon, a 12-year-old girl who had recently lost her hearing in an accident asked Ilara a question that was heavy with fear. Will anyone ever love me now? Ilara simply pulled out her phone and showed the girl a picture from her wedding day. Jamal, his eyes full of love as he signed his vows. Maya, beaming between them. And the crowd of guests, their hands all raised in the silent applause of a community built on love. The right person won't love you in spite of your differences, Ilara told her gently. They'll love you including them, because of them, with them. Your deafness isn't something to hide. It's part of your story, and your story deserves a great love. 5 years after that fateful night at the Mockingbird Cantina, Maya stood before her 6th grade class to give a presentation on her personal heroes. At 11, she was confident and bright, fluent in both English and ASL, and wore her identity with a pride that was inspiring to behold. She signed as she spoke, her voice clear and strong. Some people think being deaf means that something is missing, but in my family, being deaf is what brought us all together. It gave me a dad who was willing to learn a whole new language just for me. And it brought me Ilara, I call her mom now, who shows me every single day that our differences are what make us special, not what make us less. She clicked to the next slide, a photo from the support group's recent summer picnic. Over 100 people were gathered in a park, all laughing and signing together. My family started because one mean man couldn't see how amazing my mom was, but my dad did. He saw her worth even when she was struggling to see it herself. And now, our family...
Sweetie, I'm grateful for his ignorance.
Grateful? Maya signed, confused. Yes, if he hadn't shown me his true colors so immediately, if he had pretended to be okay with my deafness, I might have wasted months or even years of my life with the wrong person. His cruelty was a shortcut. It led me directly to you and your dad. It led me to our family. Jamal reached across the table and took Ilara's hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just doorways to the best ones. That night, I thought I was just standing up for a stranger. I had no idea I was standing up for our future. The Mockingbird Cantina still holds their table for them, the corner booth where a single father and his daughter changed a woman's life with a few simple gestures of kindness. The manager, now a dear friend, always smiles when they come in for their anniversary dinner each year. Table for 4? She asks, winking at little Marcus in his high chair, who is already signing cookie, hopefully. Table for family, Jamal always replies, and Ilara squeezes his hand, her heart full. They had built something beautiful from a single night of humiliation, not in spite of the challenges, but because of how they chose to face them. Together, their home was a symphony of laughter and silence in equal measure, a place of conversation held in gestures and expressions, a testament to a love that didn't need sound to be heard. In the end, that rainy night in Austin hadn't been an ending at all. It had been the beginning of everything. Kyle's inability to see Alara's worth had inadvertently cleared the path for something real and profound to grow. Jamal often thought about that moment when he rose from his seat, when his hands moved to sign those 3 simple words, "You deserve better." He had meant them as a simple comfort, an act of basic human decency. He had no idea he was actually signing the prologue to the greatest love story he would ever know. And Alara, who had walked into that cantina hoping for a pleasant dinner and walked out with the beginning of a family, now understood what her grandmother had always known. The right people don't see your differences as flaws. They see them as part of your constellation, the unique, brilliant pattern